Welcome to the APNIC Services session. My name is George. I'm the Service Director of APNIC. This session is for us to share with APNIC members or those who use APNIC services about our service activities or related updates. Today we have 5 speakers. First one, we have Adam Gosling. I think most of you are very familiar with Adam, so I don't need to introduce him. He'll be talking to us about gathering user insight for better APNIC services. The second speaker, Vic Vec. I think, again, most people have seen him around APNIC conferences. He's going to talk to us and share with us about some improvement for transfer experience. Followed by Chihu Chen. Again, I think he's a familiar face, but he's a new speaker joining the services session. Chihu joined us, I think, joined APNIC around middle of 2017. April, all right. So, as Infrastructure and Development Director. Fourth speaker, we have Tom Harrison. He's going to talk to us about registry improvement updates. And last one, we have George Michelson, again, a familiar face for this session. So, now, I'll pass on the mic to Adam. Who would like to, yes, would like to speak update. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Adam Gosling, and I'm going to talk to you today about user insights and APNIC services. If you've been to an APNIC meeting before, you might recognise the face, or recognise the beard at least. I'm usually working in the policy SIG, but from January 1 this year, I've got a new job, and I wanted to talk to you about that in a kind of roundabout way. Usually I work in the policy SIG, supporting the policy chairs and the community to develop policy, using the APNIC policy development process, which we usually represent like that. But briefly, it works this way. PDP starts when an author proposes a change to APNIC policy. He proposes that to the APNIC policy SIG chairs, who discuss it with the community. And if they reach consensus, we check that we understand what they want us to do. So the Secretariat asks, make sure that we know what's been proposed and what's been agreed. Then we go away and we implement the policy and we report back and say, this is what we did. So thinking about it, the APNIC policy process relies on the community telling the Secretariat what it wants. It relies on the authors proposing policy changes that they want, and the community members participating in the discussion on the mailing list during the APNIC policy SIG meeting, either directly or on chat. And it relies on a bunch of consensus decisions by the community. So it's a decision by the community to change the policy, a consensus decision by the chairs that they understand what the community wants, and by the Executive Council. It also relies on the Secretariat implementation. So what's my point? Policy implementation relies on the Secretariat accurately understanding what the community wants, what the community has told us to do, and then turning that into action. And believe me, after 8 years on the policy SIG, if the Secretariat doesn't fully understand what they've been told to do, it gets complicated really, really quickly. So APNIC's a member organisation, but we serve a very wide community of stakeholders. It's not just the membership. And we can't run a PDP process for every action the Secretariat needs to take, so we need to get input from the community, the members and the other stakeholders in the community in other ways. And one of the big ways that we do that, before I get to that, just talk about the stakeholders. This is our usual APNIC interpretation of the internet ecosystem, and it's probably impossible to read from where you're sitting, but the big green circle there represents APNIC, and it points out that we serve the membership, but we serve other community members in the Asia-Pacific region, and then also serve the global community of internet stakeholders. So it's quite a lot of people, but to different levels of service, I guess. So how do we find out what those people want? One of the big ways, and a really important way that I'd like to talk about, is the APNIC survey, which we're about to kick off. You may have seen some people talking about it already during the conference. So the last APNIC survey was run in 2016. It's every 2 years. It'll be run again this year. It's run by independent consultants. It uses a mixed methodology, and it asks questions about how the Secretariat is doing. Are we doing our job? Are we providing good services? What should we do in the future? The consultants come back, and at the next conference they'll report their findings, and they report to the EC as well, but they'll report back to the community. The Secretariat works with the EC about what actions we're going to take to address any new needs that might have been raised in the survey. And then the following meeting or in the annual report, we report back to the community about what we've done and how we're going implementing those changes. And so I've drawn this myself. It's not the official APNIC drawing, but this is kind of how it works. The APNIC community tells the Secretariat what to do, and the Secretariat reports back when it's done it. So that survey informs the 4-year strategic plan at a very high level, but each year it informs the annual budget and the annual activity plan, how much money we can spend doing the stuff that we think that you need us to do. It relies on community input, which is why we pester you to fill out the survey. But that's not the only way we gather input. The survey is quite high level, and we need to get down into the nitty-gritty when we're talking about services. So what else do we do? Well, we come to your events. We discuss things with you. We ask you questions about that. You tell us what you think. We listen to your answers. And then we'll publish a services roadmap, for example. These are the changes we're proposing to make based on the feedback that you've given us. But we don't stop there. We put a big blue button on it asking for more feedback. And hopefully you'll love it. We've been trying to get better at this. So that's our outreach program. And so over the last couple of years, Clay and Pablo have worked really hard to tighten this up. And the process when a staff member goes out to an event somewhere involves a pre-briefing before they go. They have a meeting to discuss what they're going to do when they get there and what they need to find out, if anything. And then when they get back, there's a debrief. What did you learn? Are there any action items coming out of it? And this is very regulated now. And I guess these are some of the types of events that we go to. We have our own conferences, where we attend other RAR, NIR meetings, ICANN, ISOC, and so on. We do development and training. We engage with governments and intergovernmental agencies. We participate in NOGs, CERTs, CSERTs, and even LEA events. We also send people to the IETF. As I say, it's all carefully managed and monitored internally to get information about what the community expects from the Secretariat. So, in my new role, it's part of a small restructure in the organisation to try and extend the level of detail of the feedback we get and the understanding that we have. So improving the collection and use of community consultation and feedback mechanisms, and then translate that into action for better user experience of dealing with APNIC, predominantly online, improving the functionality of the apps and services that we provide, and improving the website and portal usability. So we put together a new product development team, which is existing staff. We have a couple of new people starting soon. One very good news we just heard today. We're deploying new tools. This is an application called AHA. It's for product management, and make sure you go step by step through a methodology, a framework for developing products and services, mostly online, of course. We're looking at new ways to collect information from you. So what does all this mean? Well, there's going to be more surveys. This was a survey, I think it may still be running on the APNIC blog. What do you want to read? There's more focus groups. We're going to sit down with groups of people and ask you questions and grill you, find out what you need. There'll be more BOF sessions. I've got a data gathering BOF this afternoon. Please come along. More prototypes and betas, actually testing stuff before we send it out to full release to see if it functions the way we expect it to and see whether the button's in the right place, it works in the way you want it to. There'll be more one-on-one interviews where we sit down with you with a prototype and go through it and say, is this what you expect? What would you like? We'll watch closely as you use it. Because basically we need the community input. I won't go through this slide. There's some ways that you can give us feedback, except maybe the bottom one. This doesn't really exist yet, but I'm kind of looking for volunteers for a pre-release program where we can send you a link that's maybe not so public and get feedback about what we've built. You can start straight away though. Speak at the microphone, especially today in the services session because you've got the services director here and you can tell him exactly what you need. But it's also the policy SIG coming up and the AGM at the end of the week. You can go to the services lounge and talk to the services staff there. Hopefully everyone knows where that is. They're actually doing a survey on Whois at the moment. You can talk to George. George is doing a survey as well about BGP and RPKI, I think. Chocolate. And he's giving away free chocolate. Or you can talk to me. Basically, we're here to help. Because the more you put in, the more you get out. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So from what you have shared so far, I hope it gives paint a better picture of how APNIC is trying to continuously make improvement for service delivery. And I hope this paint a better picture of why it is important to have feedback and how we are collecting the feedback and how people can give feedback. So with that, I'd like to invite you on the floor. If you have any question that you like to ask Adam, please move up to the mic, and we're happy to answer your question. No? Well, maybe I have one, Adam, because this is your fairly new role. Are you able to share a bit more on what's your immediate priority? What's your immediate focus to start?
Yeah, absolutely, George. So my role is particularly to look at information services, we're calling it, and it's basically statistics about our delegations and other data that we have or that we can generate. So we have in the data BOF, we've got a new project for a BGP collector, which we're hoping to get the community interested in and get started. I won't give away any secrets about that. Come along to the data BOF. But there's other things as simple as making better use of the data we've got. So I guess my first priority is actually to take the IPv6 measurement data that we have in the labs area, which is all very interesting, but it's actually a little bit hard to use. And some of the tables are a little bit hard to access the information that you need. So I want to take that data and repurpose and rebuild it into a better user interface. So some of it is developing new ideas about what kind of data the community needs, and maybe doing mashups of our own data to deliver a better experience of that.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Questions? No? Okay, then. Thank you, Adam. Next, Vivek.
Right, okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vivek, and I manage the member services team at APNIC. So in this presentation, I would like to try and share some ideas that we have which may improve your transfer experience. Now, these are only ideas at this stage, so before we do anything with them, it will be nice if we can get some feedback about what you think of these ideas, whether you think they'll work and they'll help you, or whether they won't. And then that way, based on your feedback, we can decide which ideas to prioritize and work on and which ones to drop. So the transfer policy was implemented back in 2010, and the reasoning behind this policy was that the demands for IPv4 address would exist post the exhaustion of the IPv4 free pool. So at that stage, because APNIC will not be able to fulfill your IPv4 needs, members will be able to use this transfer policy to fulfill their needs. Subsequently, there were a number of changes to this policy. Most lately, it was the end of last year when we implemented policy proposal 116, which prohibits the transfer of IPs from the final/8 for a period of 5 years. Now, since this policy has been implemented, quite a large number of IPs have changed hands using this policy. Within the APNIC region, almost 17 million IPs have been transferred, and between the RIRs, the noticeable movement has been from ARIN to APNIC, where almost 10.5 million IPs have been transferred. Now, we have processed about 1,150 transfer requests or transactions to move all these millions of IPs. And as you can see on this graph, the number of transfers we process every year continues to grow. So there's certainly a strong demand out there for IPv4 transfers. Now, there are a number of transfer services we already provide to facilitate these transfers. So before I go into the ideas we have for improvements, I'd like to share what are some of these existing services that we are providing. Okay, now as the transfer policy requires you to demonstrate your needs for these IPs, we provide a service called pre-approval that you can use to demonstrate those needs in advance before you go and look for those IPs. And this way, when you find those IPs and they initiate the transfer, you don't need to worry about demonstrating your needs to APNIC at that stage in order to successfully complete that transfer. So this is quite a popular service, and almost 350 members have received pre-approvals, and of them around 240 members have used this pre-approval to get transfers. Now, once you have received your pre-approval, we give you an option to add that pre-approval into a transfer listing page. This way, other members who have the available IPs, they can see which members have received the pre-approval and then contact them to try and negotiate some transfers. Now, in the event you're not getting any leads from these services, you can use the transfer mailing list to discuss your transfer needs, or use the services of IPv4 registered brokers to potentially help you connect with the source of your next transfer. Okay, so these were the existing services we provide. So now I'll talk about some new ideas we have which may improve this experience. Now, as the first stage to prepare for your transfers is to get your pre-approval, there are some small improvements we can make in this process. So for example, we can incorporate the listing service option in the pre-approval form itself. So this way, if you opt in for this service, once your pre-approval is processed, we can immediately add you to the listing service. Now, these pre-approvals are also valid for 24 months. So in the event you cannot find transfers within them, they expire, and then you need to submit a fresh pre-approval. So we can streamline this process by simply asking you to confirm if your needs still exist and you're still looking for transfers. And once you confirm that, we can just renew it for another 24 months. Now, once you have received your pre-approval, the next step is to find the available source for transfers. And a lot of members have given feedback that this is the area they have problems. Recently, I attended a conference, a BDNOC conference in Dhaka, and some members there told me, generally in Bangladesh, if some business is going down and some IPs become available, all the members there find out about it, and then they're fighting with each other to try and secure that transfer, so it becomes hard. So one idea we have to improve this experience is to provide a different type of listing service where members who have the available address space can publish that availability so that other members who are looking for IPs can then contact them and try to negotiate a transfer. Now, there is quite a significant number of IP addresses which is reclaimed by APNIC every year for a number of different reasons. Now, some members who return their IPs, they may not be aware that they have the option to transfer them. Some members may be aware, but they're not interested to transfer them because they don't want to go through the whole process of finding the accounts who need them and then to negotiate the transfer. So if we did have this kind of listing service, more members will be aware that they have the option to transfer, and if some of them choose to use this service, that may help out more members who are out there looking for transfers. Okay, now say you have found a potential source for your transfer. You've received some emails saying, I have some IPs, contact me if you're interested. How do you know for sure that you are dealing with the custodians of those resources and not some fraudster? So this is where RPKI may come in handy. Currently, our members use RPKI to create ROAs to show which ASN you have authorized to announce your IPs, but we could expand the scope of RPKI so members can use it to issue any statement about the resource, including custodianship. And then we can provide relevant tools to the receiving parties who can use that to cryptographically validate that that statement is made by the custodian. And then lastly, once you're satisfied that you're dealing with the true custodians, one last check you may want to do is on the quality of those IPs. So we could provide some tools that can check if there are any known blacklisting issues with those IPs, what kind of geolocation information is there, and potentially some historic information like how many past custodians has that IP had, who were those custodians using our WHOBOS service. And then once you have all that information, you can make an educated decision whether you want to go ahead with that transfer. And then finally, if you're trying to do some inter-RIR transfers, we can streamline this process by moving that form into MyIPNIC. So currently, if you want to do inter-RIR transfers, you need to fill a manual template and then email it to the help desk team. If we move this form online, then MyIPNIC can pre-fill and validate a lot of the information, the administrative information, such as the source account details, when it was delegated, and so on. So this should potentially reduce human errors as well as the number of email iterations, and that should in turn speed up the entire inter-RIR transfer process. Okay, so basically that's the summary of all the different ideas we have. I have listed them in this page and happy to answer questions or get some feedback on what you think of these ideas. Any feedback, suggestions, maybe different ideas?
Any question for Vivek? So obviously, all these ideas is probably, we know member service team has very, our frontline service delivery staff worked in this member service team. They often have heard feedback or receive feedback either by email or when we go out to other events, NOCs, and conferences and so on. So I would say these ideas probably based on those most commonly feedback or the support that's given that you identified.
That's right.
Are there, so you got some few ideas here in terms of perhaps frequency or priority or mostly demanded support? Do you have that?
The most common question would be, well, firstly, they want to understand how it's done, but when it's all done, the problem is where do we find these IPs and can APNIC help? And at this stage, there's limited help we can give, so that's why we're sharing some ideas here, which may help more.
Okay. All right. All right, we have a question.
myself Abhishek from IREN. Actually, we have some problems that suppose some member want to transfer their IP resources. There is a, whether these IPs are clean or not. That is also a problem with us. So whether Spam House or some other, they have blacklisted those IPs.
Yeah.
So APNIC, how can APNIC help in those cases? So whether we should transfer, go ahead with the transfer, or we should stop that transfer?
I think there's limited things we can do in terms of fixing if something is wrong. What we can do is make that information available.
Yeah.
And most of that information is already available, but
Yeah.
we can put like in one place where you can get all that information.
Exactly,
Some-
exactly.
So some
So
of the
we need to
APNIC
check that from Spam House, that whether it is clean or not.
That's right.
So if APNIC should provide any tool to check it
Yeah.
before transferring that. So it's a suggestion from my side.
That it's a good idea.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks.
All right. Any more questions? Okay. If not, thanks, Vivek. Next, I would like to introduce Tom Harrison, who is our software engineer managers, to talk about some of the registry improvements. Sorry, oh, do we want to swap the...
Good morning. My name is Tom Harrison. I'm the software unit manager at APNIC, and today I'm going to be talking about some recent registry improvements we've made and one that's currently in progress. Once I get back to the earlier slide. Sorry about that. Firstly, there's the whois last modified attribute. Then there are two RPKI items. The first one is the transition to the single trust anchor, and the second is Delta Protocol service deployment. Then there's the NRO transfer log, which is now being published by most of the RIRs. And in progress at the moment is RPKI publication service deployment. Last modified is a new attribute in whois that appears in all the objects. It contains the time at which an object was last updated. The important thing about it and the difference between it and other attributes in whois is that it's managed by the server rather than the user. So when the server processes an update for an object, it sets this value accordingly. The last modified attribute replaces the previous changed attribute, which served a similar purpose, but for the changed attribute, it was maintained by the user rather than the server. So unsurprisingly, people would forget to update it, they'd make typos and things like that, so it wasn't possible to rely on that data. Having the server take care of this is obviously much more sensible. At the moment, our whois server still accepts updates that include the changed attribute, even though it's deprecated. When this happens, the user receives a warning about the attribute being deprecated, and the server removes all of the changed attributes before persisting the update. We had planned on transitioning to rejecting those updates, but unfortunately, even today, we still see a large volume of updates that include that old attribute. Next is the transition to the single RPKI trust anchor. This involved deprecating 4 of the TAs that we used to run and then expanding the remaining TA to cover IPv4 0/0 and the equivalent IPv6 and ASN ranges. All RIRs have now transitioned to using this model, so the cross-RIR consistency we were looking for here has been achieved. From a more day-to-day perspective, we have far fewer TA-facing operations to perform, so that makes running the system for us simpler. The second RPKI update, just deployed a few weeks ago, is support for the Delta protocol. Currently, RPKI CAs must provide their repository content via rsync. The Delta protocol is an alternative mechanism for distributing repository content built on top of HTTP. So when a CA supports this, it adds this extra Delta protocol URL to its certificate, and then relying party software that supports it can optionally use that mechanism instead of rsync to keep itself up to date. One big difference between rsync repository URLs and Delta protocol URLs is that an rsync repository URL is unique for each CA in our system, whereas the Delta protocol URL can be used to cover an arbitrary number of CAs. This helps to simplify administration of the system, and it also means that synchronization of the repository can be done more efficiently. Unlike rsync, HTTP doesn't have anything built in for this sort of synchronization use case, so the protocol defines a snapshot and delta model to handle that. This is an example run-through of the use of the protocol. So the server enables the protocol, and the first thing it does is generate a snapshot. And the snapshot contains all of the current state from the repository. When a client comes along and it supports the protocol, it retrieves the URL, and what it gets back is a list of links to the snapshot and to the deltas that the server has. In this case, the client just takes the snapshot content and uses that to bring its local state up to date. And it also makes a note of the snapshot serial number. Then some time passes, some changes happen on the server, adding a row, removing a row, things like that. And the server constructs deltas, which represent those repository changes, and then publishes them. At the same time, it keeps the snapshot up to date. So the snapshot is always whatever the current state in the repository is. So the client resynchronizes, and because its previous serial number was 1 and the current snapshot serial number is 3, it needs to find a sequence of deltas from 1 to 3. So in this case, that sequence exists because deltas 2 and 3 are there. So the client follows just those links, applies the deltas to its local state, and it's up to date. An example error scenario is when the client doesn't resynchronize often enough. So the server doesn't have to publish deltas indefinitely. It can start removing old ones after some threshold period has been reached. In this case, unfortunately for the client, the server has stopped publishing delta number 4. So when the client tries to resynchronize and it's at delta number 3, it can no longer find that sequence to bring itself up to date. Easily dealt with, the server just gets rid of its local state and resynchronizes based on the snapshot. Why are we doing this work? There are some problems with the use of rsync, specifically in the RPKI context. The slide pack on this slide goes into that in some detail. Also, the Delta protocol RFC itself has some content on this. Probably the most notable aspect is that rsync has a very strong focus on minimizing transfer sizes. The way it does this is by treating each client uniquely, so it finds out what each client has in order to optimize this. That's fairly intensive on the server side, and it also inhibits scalability. The Delta protocol, on the other hand, has this model of immutable files. So it's much easier on the server because it's not, there's no client uniqueness aspect. and it also allows for the service to be scaled more easily by use of services like CDNs. A more practical immediate benefit is that relying party software can synchronize more quickly. This is particularly notable with the RPKI.net relying party software, which doesn't have to do nearly as many network calls when it's using the Delta protocol and it's synchronizing against APNIC's repository. The next item is the NRO transfer log, which is a standard way of publishing transfer information. It came about because each RIR was doing a different thing in this space. It's now published by most of the RIRs, with AFRINIC to start publishing later this year. And like the delegated stats files, it's published in the same place on each registry's FTP server. So this should make things easier for people who do statistics work. Finally, there's the RPKI publication service work that's currently in progress. Today, when a member wants to run a self-hosted RPKI engine, which means instead of doing it within my APNIC, they look after it themselves, they have to also set up and maintain an rsync service so that they can publish their repository content. The main motivating factor for doing this work, which allows people to push updates to APNIC and have APNIC handle the publication of them, is that we have some members who are unable to run public rsync servers because of various operational constraints that they have. So by implementing this service, we are supporting them to deploy self-hosted RPKI engines. Thanks. Does anybody have any questions?
Question for Tom on any of the registry services improvement? Tom, I picked up that you mentioned this with Delta protocol, or my question is in relation to RPKI. Delta protocol that's been deployed now and we continue to maintain rsync. What's the future planning for that, and would any change that have any impact to the members who are using the service?
There's a long-term plan in this space to deprecate entirely the use of rsync within RPKI. But this is a fairly involved piece of work. There are a few different parts to it as well. It's not just one thing that needs to be changed. There are staff from RIPE in particular who are doing some work in this space, but it's a work in progress.
I trust that we will keep the people updated when there's changes or further planning for the future.
Yep, definitely.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions? No? Well, next up, I'd like to invite Chehu. If you're ready for...
Yeah, ready.
Thank you.
Okay. It's afternoon now. Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Chihu. I'm the Infrastructure and Development Director of APNIC. Now I want to talk about APNIC training in 2018. Of course, we do a lot of face-to-face training. We classify the training into two categories. One is tutorial, one is workshop. For tutorial, usually is 2 days or less. Most of the time it's 1 day, or maybe sometimes maybe half day. And for the class size, since it would not involve in any hands-on or lab or things like that, so we can have larger class size. But for workshop, usually is 3 days or more, up to 5 days. Since we'll have hands-on lab exercises, the class size usually would be up to 30. Sometimes we can do up to 40, but we don't want to go beyond 40. And we, in fact, do a lot of this kind of face-to-face training. We do usually do 4 or even more per month. And our topics will include the following: IXP routing, IPv6, etc. And for this kind of training, our focus is more for intermediate to advanced level of training. Since this is interactive, we don't want to. We mostly cover the technical engineers, and we hope we can make better use of the time to do more advanced training. And when we do the training, we usually will send 2 trainers, and in some of the cases, we will partner with like ICANN or ISOC, so that they can help out, especially on like DNS set training. ICANN is partnering with us quite often. And after the completion, we'll provide the certification of attendance. But as you understand, this kind of training is not very scalable because we need to, our trainers need to travel, and then we only have 3 headcounts for the staff trainers, so we cannot do too many face-to-face trainings. But this may not be able to fulfill all the demand, so we need to think a way to how to scale up this kind of training. Another important part of the training portfolio will be the APNIC Academy. This is relatively new, is around 1 year old, and it's a self-paced learning platform using Moodle. We usually would only do introductory to intermediate level of training for that platform, and people will, of course, do their training according to their own pace, and we will provide certification of achievement after they finish the training and passing the simple quizzes. This kind of training is highly scalable because we can use the same platform to support thousands or tens of thousands of people. And currently, we have 3 courses available: Introduction to Cybersecurity, Internet Resource Management, and we just have soft launched a new course called Routing Basics. And we launched it for about 10 days, and now we have 10 people completing the courses. That's quite good, in fact. And this is the roadmap that we plan for the future courses, including Introduction to V6, Internet Routing Protocols, Address Policies, DNS Concepts, and RPKI. We also have a e-learning type of training using the webcasting platform, Adobe Connect. But because it's kind of live, people need to go to the training at a specific time, and for the training, we usually can only do 1 hour up to 2 hours. It's not very popular. So we are now scaling down this service because of the low rates of attendance. In some of the cases, we could only get like maybe 3 or lower number of attendees. It's not very cost effective. And since we need to have colleagues to online for that training, so this kind of training, if we are just serving like 3 to 5 or 7 attendees, is not very good. And so our planning is to replace this with APNIC Academy. And probably it's also good for people because attendees, the students, can do their training according to their own pace, and they don't need to go to our platform at a specific time. And our goals in 2018 is to build a solid foundation. We want to, we construct our training and so that we can do better, especially the scaling up of the APNIC training. With the good foundation, we can scale up our training more easily. Scale up meaning we can support more people doing more training. And one of the foundation work that we need to do is to make our training content more structured, more standardized, including like making our training content more modularized. And with the modularized training content, we can customize training more easily. For a certain topic, maybe even routing, maybe or SDN, depending on the request, we can do 3 days or 5 days or 4 days, based on like the negotiation with the host. And with the modularized setup, we can do it more easily. And another point that we need to do a lot better is to employ more qualified community trainers to help us to deliver more training to members and community. I'll talk more about that. But the long-term goals is not for this year; it's for 2019 or beyond. We look for like accreditation, certification. I mean, certification means people would, when they get our certification, they at least people would know they achieve certain level of like knowledge from our training. That would mean they would go through some examinations or things like that. And another important part is the local language support. All our training right now are all in English. It may not be enough for certain economies, and we are looking for a solution, but we cannot do it within this year. We think about it in the future. And when we have like more structured training and things like that, we look for training partners to deliver our training, and so that we can scale up even more. Regarding our training materials, the licensing part, we adopt Creative Commons attribution, non-commercial share alike, if you know what it means. Basically, it's open source. People can make use of our contents to further develop their training contents, but it has to be non-commercial. It has to say it's from us, and they also will share the content with others using the same or compatible licensing terms. And we will work, of course, we don't want to duplicate effort, so we will work closely with other partners which have compatible licensing terms for training materials. When someone develops very good content and they use this compatible licensing terms, we will make use of the training materials and further develop it. And then our revised training materials can be used by them also. So that's our idea. Regarding our team, you probably may have heard about the reorganization we just did in APNIC. Now we have a new infrastructure and development team, and the team will be more technical, infrastructure focused or oriented. And under the same team, we also have infrastructure services team and security team. These people are highly technical, so that the training team, in fact, can get help and support from the other teams more easily than before. But for the training team, we actually have 3 sub-teams, including training curriculum manager and team, training service manager team, and senior development coordinator team. I'll talk more about them. Regarding the training curriculum manager, it's a new position. In the past, our training manager would be in charge of training delivery as well as the content development, but it's very hard to, take care of both parts. If there are a lot of training going on, the position cannot, do a lot of content development. So we think we need to split the role into two. And so now we have a new training curriculum manager who would be in charge of content development and management, curriculum development and management, APNIC Academy development, and even design of the community trainers program. And but of course, for the content development part, the position will work with subject matter experts because the team and himself may not be the expert in this area. So, but anyway, the guy will be in charge of content, and this position in the team will not be in charge of the training delivery. And in fact, we have identified the appropriate person, and he will be on board next week after we're back. It's a good news for us. But for the training delivery part, we'll have a training services manager in charge of that, and of course, we also have technical assistance service. So this position will take care of technical assistance also. And we have 3 headcounts for the staff trainers. So this manager will manage those staff trainers, and at the same time, this position will manage the community trainers program. And so the community trainers program will be community trainers will be managed by this position. And of course, our thinking is to recruit the community trainers from this community. So the position will also in charge of technical community engagement. And because of that, and because this position will be highly technical, so this position will help recruit subject matter experts to develop training content. But now the position is vacant, and for the senior development coordinator, actually is also a very important position, and you may have heard about her, is Lisa. She takes care of training scheduling, training coordination, and logistics. And we have, under training team, we have 2 vacancies. One is the training service manager, one is the training officer. And if you have, anyone who appropriate for this position, please, encourage him or her to apply. For the community trainers, as I mentioned, it's very important to us because if we want to do more face-to-face trainings, we need a lot of help. But right now we want to revamp the program to make it more structured, more creditable. And the community trainers will need, more proper assessment. And one of the ways to do it will be start as an assistant trainer during the assessment period. And if, the trainers can pass our assessment, then we will officially recruit them as the community trainers. And we plan to recruit 20 or more community trainers from around the region. And for community trainers, usually would be from the technical community here with good operational experience. They are supposed to have full-time job. So when they help us, they are considered as volunteers. We will give them a small honorarium for each engagement. Their support sometimes will be for, not just for the technical part, but also for the local language support, or sometimes regional knowledge and expertise is also very helpful to us. And when we further develop our training, we will consider them as our advisors. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., we'll have a BOF. We hope to use the BOF to gather inputs from the participants to improve our community trainers program. If you're interested, please join that BOF. And we also hope all the existing and prospective community trainers join us too. And about technical assistance, we would help our members on certain issues that they may have. This highly customized is more of an interactive session. It's not training, but interactive session. Through the discussion, we would provide advices to them. It's not a service comparable to the paid consultants that you may engage, but at least for developing countries, they may get some good advice from us and then to improve their network infrastructure. And our current focuses would be IXP routing and IPv6. And if it's just for one member, usually we will have cost recovery for that. And if you want more information, you can obtain the information from these links. And that's it. Any questions?
Hey, George Adaji from APNIC. I've got a remote participant on Adobe Connect asking, his name is Narayana Swami, and he says, can't you consider remote participation training to avoid time, traveling and staying costs?
Remote participation. It really depends on where we hold the training. It's sometimes similar to the e-learning. If we hold it in one location, in certain location we may not be able to do remote participation. But for a certain location we may be able to do it. It is a suggestion that we can consider, but may not be for all of our training. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Benjamin from IDNIC. Could you please give us more information about APNIC Academy? Because in Indonesia, we have a lot of district who needs a trainer. We always ask Pak Wita about how to make the schedule for every 2 months, something like that. He said that the schedule for the trainer is very tight. So I suggest, how about if for each NRR, for instance, send 2 trainer, maybe you can do a training of trainer that you said before. So about the curriculum or about the strategy, about how APNIC can make the training, something like that. So we can translate in our language, so our trainer can help APNIC to, especially for the schedule limited. That can you read, APNIC?
Yeah, this is actually in our plan, but as I mentioned, we want to build our foundation stronger first, and then we will, work with the partners, including NIRs, to help us to translate the training materials into local languages, and through them, after we do the trainers program, the partners can do the training by themselves. That's the plan, but it would take a bit of time. For this year, as I mentioned, it's mostly for build up the foundation. And that's why we have the training curriculum manager to help us.
Any more questions for Chehu?
Good afternoon. My name is Terry from CNISP. Yeah, I reviewed the course on the website of ipnic.net. Yeah, it's detailed, but our demand is make the course independent on IPv6, not only on IPv6 like DNS, whatever. For example, DDoS. Okay, our NOC department, they know how to solve the. Maybe they don't know what DDoS is exactly, but they can solve it. So I mean, if you can make a independent course on IPv6, sorry, not only on theory but also on practice. Yeah, I know, I understand it's difficult, but we need it. Thank you.
Okay, I heard the suggestions. We in our courses, especially the workshops, it's not just for the theory, but we also have lab exercises. I think that would be the hands-on part. It's more practical, but it's not perfect. If you have any suggestions, especially if you are doing training also, you can help us to improve our training content. And in fact, we also work with partners like, especially we just had meeting with ISOC about the manners training, and we will incorporate that training into our training. And if you have like a similar training or maybe DDoS that you mentioned, that we can incorporate into our training courses as a module, and then when people need it, we can like do the training. And if you have the same licensing terms, these Creative Commons licensing terms.
Okay, we can talk about later.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chihu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Well, thanks, Chihu, for your very informative presentation. I hope you all now have a better picture of how our training services, the courses, and how the team structure to improve and keep improving our training services, which is one of highly demanded APNIC services. And also, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chihu. Next, I'd like to introduce George Michelson to talk about his subject. If you follow, George Michelson actually is one of our productive blogger, and if you are one of his followers, you probably have read about what he posted a couple of weeks ago and what he's going to present. But here, George, please.
Thank you, George. I love this talking slot because I get to be the one who gives you back half an hour of your life to go to lunch early. But actually, all my fellow speakers had to contribute to this deliverable. So the glory is not mine, it belongs to all of us. I've wanted to use a Futurama slide for a very long time. I've even been practicing having only 4 fingers so that I can be a real cartoon hero. I don't have hair, and my glasses are thick, so I think I can be Professor Farnsworth. Good news, everyone! But really, this is a good news story. This is a small story about successfully talking with the other RIRs about how internet routing registries work and the consequences of some data management decisions that they made. So this is an email which was sent more like 2 weeks ago now. It says 2 days, but that's when I screen grabbed. And it's the closing confirmation from the working group chair in the RIPE region that they reached consensus to drop out of region root objects in their database. So it was really abundantly clear in that conversation, nobody within that community of discussion wanted to retain this ability. He was very, very clear. And they just took a long time getting closure, but basically they agreed to stop doing something. And this is the key message. It's one of those occasions where saying let's not do something is the win. Because a lot of the time we talk about doing things as if it's the win, but this is one of those times when not doing something is the win. They stopped. So as a result of this policy conversation, and this has been going on for several years now, we are going to see a closure of a security hole that has allowed resources from our region, resources from the Arin region, from Afrinik, from LACNIC, to be promiscuously announced within European routing operations praxis. Now, it was never their goal that this hole would be used by bad actors. They didn't set out to create this situation. They felt that in the interests of European routing practice, they should allow European operators to bring out-of-region resources into the routing registry to make valid declarations about them. But unfortunately, the mechanism that was used was built for a much simpler time. It was built for a smaller community, it was built for a situation with a lot more mutual trust, and it provided an opportunity for bad actors to make announcements randomly that had quite bad effect for us. So, in effect, this decision to close off really is closing a mechanism that was being used actively to hijack Asia-Pacific resources. Now, there is a number of valid records that remain in use that are part of the routing declarations made in this space, and they are going to be preserved. So RIPE is not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They're going to maintain this information, but they're moving it from the mainstream WHOIS space to a special new denoted source, and you will have to ask for it actively. Which means when people make casual queries in RIPE saying, wow, should I really see this block being announced from an AS number in Europe? It's not automatically going to give responses that include this behavior. To give you some background, we raised this at a RIPE meeting in Amsterdam back in 2015. It had been the subject of a lot of ongoing issues for a number of years, but we never formally discussed it until then. And then through 2015 through 2017, we had an ongoing conversation with two separate working groups in RIPE, the database working group and the routing working group, because there was a kind of functional split between these two discussion spaces, one of them talking primarily about adding features to a database, and the other talking about routing practice management in that community. And it needed both of them to come to a common position that something had to happen. So concrete proposals to deprecate actually came from within the RIPE region. This was something that was taken on board within the region, and it was a decision made inside this community autonomously for themselves, which I think is lovely, that they recognized our concern as an outside group, but they actually came up with this outcome individually. And they have actually gone the distance now and have published their intention to move on technical changes in their infrastructure to close this hole. So there is a body of work that is going to be undertaken. First of all, they're going to actually adjust their authorization mechanism, and this also mimics something that we have already done in the APNIC region. The RIPE model demanded that both the AS holder and the address holder came together in permission space to make a declaration of routing. That was the model in RPSL. Since we only requires the permission of the address holder. So you have this rather odd moment where we make a binary syntactic structure that says, I wish my resources to be originated, but the semantics say, I, the address holder. It doesn't say we, the address holder and the AS holder. So we had a cryptographically strong statement, what is my origination intent? And we had RPSL saying, no, you need the AS holder to agree. So they have realized that this is really a change. Then they're looking at creating a new source ripe non-auth, which is going to be for the existing objects to relocate into. So this is non-destructive data management. It's moving into a different space, leaving the prime registry clean. And then finally, they will adjust their query engine to respond differently, because currently their default search space has certain behaviors, and they will be adjusting that to take account of this move. Now, the critical part is that there will be no further new objects created. I'd say that's absolute, but I suspect that there will be legitimate reason for things to be changed in this space, and they have allowed for that. It probably will be a slightly more complex manual process, but there's a recognition that people will need to make changes to this data, and they're going to permit that. They are, however, going to be getting rid of this open maintainer that had a well-known password. So the primary mechanism that has been used by some bad actors is going to be completely closed off, and they'll make all the obvious documentation changes. And there is also a question that has to be resolved about our inter-region transfer process. We actually have to understand that root objects don't necessarily move when the data moves. We actually have to think about the consequences for people using routing registries when we change where we manage the resource. So there's a little bit of work to do there. Well, the primary outcome here for us as a community is that we now have functional control of our resources. If you have information that you are managing in this framework in RIPE, it's going to remain there. But it's clearly denoted that it is foreign space in the RIPE region. You have control, and it's probably going to be removed, but you will be informed. If you have things that you need to originate via an origin AS that doesn't lie in this region but lies in RIPE, you actually now have a functional engagement. You're going to have to be asked if that's the outcome you want. So it's a clearer behavior here. You have the control moment, which means you have explicit consent acts when people make routing declarations. Now, we need to be clear. This doesn't mean that there will be no hijacks. This does not mean there will be no bad actors, because routing registries aren't a very high brick wall which exclude or include things. They're a form of routing expression that some people use to control their routing, but by no means all people. So all we've done is take one kind of problem in the house of cards, which is routing, and changed it slightly. There are still going to be bad actions, but one of the mechanisms has been closed off. There are other things that can happen, and you need to think about creating strong assertions of what you actually want to happen with your internet number resources. I understand that there is limited uptake of RPKI for actually checking BGP routing for constructing configuration. We know the reality. But nonetheless, making a signed object, making a public declaration, an attestation of what you really mean by intent, that's a very strong thing. And even though it may not be understood by people who are filtering routing or filtering what they see, it still stands.
It wasn't my 5 minutes for me. Any question for George?
I would actually like to thank the community for giving us the information through help desk and through services that you were seeing problems, and giving us in effect permission to engage with the RIPE NCC. And I'd also like to thank the RIPE NCC staff who are here, who have been facilitating this conversation. As secretariats, we are somewhat bound to consider carefully what the community wants. So we don't just arbitrarily change things because someone comes and knocks at the door. He has been speaking with us about this, and I think there may be some closure in his frequent mails on this matter. I'm hoping it might reduce your traffic a little bit.
We actually take investigative actions and sometimes real actions from a lot of his emails.
Yeah, I mean, these people are actually working to good intent, but it's difficult when they keep saying, can't you close this hole? So maybe now we can say, well, we tried. You know, it's different problems exist. It's not the registry anymore.
Exactly. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, John, for your kind words.
Yeah, I'm Thuy from BNA. May I have a
Hello.
question to you? Thank you for your presentation, your series about RIPE NCC database. So I would like to ask you, do you have the similar things for IPNIX database? I mean the object from other regions,
Yes,
for example?
we have had a small number of people request to include foreign resources, and we have to make some fairly active consideration of when we would do this and why we would do this. Unlike RIPE, we don't have the open door mechanism. So in RIPE, there was a well understood open door mechanism for anyone to self-enable this feature. In APNIC, if you want to make this kind of routing statement, you have to talk to us, and we can then engage with the prime holders and understand what you are doing. And then we can use override permissions to do things, but you have to talk to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for George before the session? All right. If not, I'd like to thank you all for your time and sitting here and listening to us. And I hope we share something that is useful and valuable to you. But I like to go back to Adam's presentation, the first presentation. That it's really important that when we are providing a service, we hearing the needs and we know what is required of us to make continuous improvement. Some needs may not exist now, but perhaps will rise in the next 6 months. So we really would like to encourage you to share your feedback with us. So that's not that our conversation stop after this session. We like to hear from you anytime when you have something to share with us, to tell us how we can do better to serve you. So with that, I'd like to close this session so we can all go for lunch. And again, thank you very much for your attention.